Challenge is a concept deeply rooted in the design of every single game. It gives players a reason to play. Without a challenge, there's no meaning in playing a game. The aspects of challenge that this video will cover are hidden factors to create difficulty, the balancing act challenge requires, how teaching a player affects challenge, the satisfaction that challenge creates, and the influence on a game's audience that challenge has. I will be starting with how hidden factors affect a player's response to a game. Difficulty is a concept that can often be the ruling force behind a game's core mechanics and the way that it is received by the general public. Created by the game makers, Furi is a key example of this. The only directive in the game is to beat numerous bosses within their own arenas in a duel. Drawing on both emergent and progression-based gameplay, Furi plays as a hack and slash, as well as a bullet hell. There are many mechanics and controls for the player to learn, either through what is told to them or through general practice. In this unforgiving game, many of these untaught skills will be needed. This leads to a rift between players as some will intuitively start to understand the game, whereas others may struggle with unseen issues that they cannot pin down. It marks a standpoint between the concept of challenge. For a game to feel fair, it should have variation in difficulty. Bob Bates uses an example of a roller coaster to describe this. Challenge should have build-ups and feature peaks and valleys to create an interesting game that is also fair to the player. Tracy Fullerton goes on to describe, increasing the challenge as the game goes on can cause a rising sense of tension, or if the challenge is too great, it causes frustration. Furi objectively does both, but starts by frustrating some through its control scheme. It begs the question, is this difficulty, or is it mechanics working against me, the player, by not fully teaching them to me? For example, Furi's control scheme has nuances to it which an inexperienced player may not understand. Dodging, a key feature to keep the player alive, only occurs on the release of the dodge button rather than the initial press. The purpose of this is so that the player can charge the dodge to move further, as shown. The use of this is evident. It's clear to see that the player has travelled a much greater distance safely. However, for some, it creates a laggy experience, leading to cheap damage to the player. As Cecilia D'Anastasio of Kotaku describes, the delay on your dash mechanic, intentionally I'd imagine, makes it extremely difficult to time when dodging. She is unaware that the design has purpose, shown by the fact that she can't tell if this is by design or not. This is interesting, as it shows that the controls are not intuitive to all that play and can simply act as an obtrusive measure to increase difficulty. Creating a game in this manner tends to dissatisfaction for the player, which Furi dev Americ Thoa is not looking for. To quote, "In order to create intense satisfaction, you need to require efforts." Whilst Furi's difficulty itself is something that requires effort, and that the satisfaction of beating its bosses is strong, it is somewhat marred for various players due to an unfairness in difficulty because of something that is unknown to the player. Take for example, the use of flying in multiplayer game Rocket League. If one player knows how to apply this skill, the other will then be at a great disadvantage. Within the game's tutorial, this is mentioned once in the optional Advanced tutorial. Similar to Furi, this is close to disguising mechanics that both greatly benefit the player and are satisfying to use. Again, there is a mechanic Furi does not teach the player, a charged slash that does vast damage to the boss within the close quarters combat sections of a fight. It can only be found through experimentation or by watching other players use it, the same way in which a lot of Rocket League players discover flying. However, this is still fair, as in both games players have the same amount of knowledge of these systems, none in Furi, except what is taught in the tutorial, and all that is available to learn in Rocket League. The rules do not advantage or disadvantage players in ways that they cannot influence or prevent. This is part of what makes Furi such a divisive game, its core design choices. Compared to mainstream games, it simply cannot tick all boxes to satisfy players, so instead works on creating a niche audience, in the same way that the Souls games began. The game is based upon creating a sense of satisfaction for the player, and sacrifices mainstream popularity for it. The game is presented in a simple manner, and the player is given just enough teaching to complete the game. It is up to them to work out its hidden features and skills. As a player's skill increases, as does the challenge, and Furi's end leaves the player feeling satisfied. The emotive nature of this design creates an experience greater than the sum of its parts. Through the use of learning, games just become much more satisfying. It harks back to the era of games like Pac-Man, where the concept is simple, but the addictive nature of improving and accessing higher scores draws players back in. For Furi, this is the same. It is difficult and may shut some players out, but as Thor describes, I don't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everybody. The difficulty of Furi is part of its persona, and in building it around this concept, the game makers created something that is highly memorable for a niche group of players. Difficulty is, oddly enough, difficult to apply successfully to a game and can lead to various successes and failures. Despite some views against it, Furi uses it very well and is one of the few games that can bring such a visceral sense of satisfaction to the player. To conclude, Challenge offers a lot of depth and creates unique personal experiences for every player as we all learn and adapt differently. Personally, I believe Furi and games like it offer an experience with greater satisfaction than a standard AAA game, and because of this are vital to the games industry. Challenge, when balanced well, is a blessing, and without it, we would never have games in the first place. Thank you for watching.